think a lot of people, find themselves in a relationship with alcohol from
Yeah.
culture, from their social, events and all this kind of stuff. And there obviously is a desire to drink. People are ready and excited for happy hour and, they want to go out golfing with their buddies. But to just say love, I think is actually a non truth. I think we all have a love hate relationship with alcohol. And
Mm.
what that means is that there's always a negative side to it as well that we're not as honest about as a society. Now, obviously, we have the kind of stereotype in our world that, there's the alcoholics who are losing their jobs and, living under a bridge. And we think, okay, well, I don't have that many negative,
Well,
consequences happening. But, who actually wakes up after drinking feeling good the next day? I don't even think it's biologically possible for someone to wake up the next day after drinking and feel like $1 million, right? And so it's like this thing where sometimes, maybe we do want to be drinking less for our health, or we want to be drinking less for our productivity or our goals. And yet when we do find ourselves in these social occasions, maybe we have a few too many and we wake up the next day almost cursing ourselves. Like, why am I here again in this pattern where, I'm not living up to, the standards and the dreams that I have, and I'm kind of just feeling blah on a Monday morning. And that's where I was. That's where I found myself. So I started drinking as a late teenager, and I really started drinking in college. And it was a total party lifestyle. Like, there were no boundaries around it. It was that kind of, drink any day of the week type of thing with your friends. And I didn't really notice that many of those kind of quiet intuitions about alcohol not serving me. I wasn't as intuitive back then. And it was just, so young, so free type of a feeling, right? But as I grew up, I really, wanted to become a healthier, more mindful person. And so what happened was that as I got married, as I started my career, as I really started settling down as an adult, drinking became something that I only did on the weekend. I only tried to do socially. Obviously, I drink sometimes at home too with some wine and Netflix, but I tried to make it more adult, more responsible. And so Monday through Thursday, I lived this very healthy lifestyle. I was going to yoga classes, I was drinking green juices, I was journaling, but then every single weekend I drank. Every single weekend. There was not one weekend I missed, right?
mm,
It was your weddings, it was your happy hours, it was sushi nights, it was opening a bottle of wine with some Netflix every weekend. And on Monday mornings, I always felt like I had taken 2 steps forward in my healthy lifestyle during the week and 5 steps backward over the weekend. And it was this cyclical gnawing at me. Like, literally, my intuition was just telling me, you're made for so much more than this, so much more than this pattern. I wasn't satisfied in my career at that point. I was feeling like I was living a very ordinary, mediocre life. And so even though I had thought that the only type of person who would ever, think about removing alcohol was someone who identified as an alcoholic and needed to go to AA meetings, I finally heard about Dry January, which actually was born in the UK as a health campaign, to just, go a month without alcohol. And
mm.
that kind of opened my eyes of like, oh, I could just take a break. I could just try, a month without alcohol without having to explain it to all these people. And that was the first time as an adult that I really, tried life without alcohol. And the month was amazing. That's not to say I didn't have cravings or miss it sometimes, but the pride I felt every day, the deep sleep I had every day, the energy I woke up with, the new joy that I was finding and new activities and pleasure, it was amazing. And then come February, I didn't really think I could continue. I had this rule in my mind that normal adults drink. If you want to be normal, you have to drink. And I did drink a few times in that February, and it was such a letdown, such a letdown. Even 1 or 2 drinks I noticed would make me feel so foggy and groggy the next day. But even in the moment, like 20 to 30 minutes after I had that drink, I noticed my mood would crash. I would feel frustrated, cranky, just moody, picking fights with my husband. I was like, wait a minute. In dry January, I was so euphoric, going on hikes, feeling like I'm communing with nature and the trees and the clouds. And here I am having a drink that's supposed to make me happier and have be fun. And I'm feeling more apathetic and more cranky than ever. Something's not right here. And that's when I decided to take another break from alcohol and really go deep, 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 not only into the science behind what alcohol is doing to our bodies, but also all of the beliefs that I might have had up until that point of what alcohol is doing in the positive that may not have been true anymore for me, both from a physical level, but also from the things that I picked up from when I was younger. Like, alcohol makes me more confident, it makes me more talkative, it makes me all these things. And I tear down everything that I formerly believed about what alcohol was doing for me in the positive. And what happened was I completely lost my desire. After that, my confidence, my courage surged. And I went from living this mediocre life, hanging out in a cubicle for my career, to launching a global company, leaving my day job, writing a best-selling book, and now I travel the world with my husband leading our movement, and I am so fulfilled. And at the end of the day, I think alcohol was that weekend reward to a life that I didn't actually find fulfilling. And that's why, my purpose isn't just to help people stop drinking. It's like, what is that a band-aid for? What is that a band-aid for when there's such a deeper sense of joy and meaning and purpose that we can find when we reevaluate that and really see what your soul wants and what it came to this planet to do.
Wow, there's a whole lot there. Where do I start? I think, well, there's so many questions come out of that. One of the things you've hit on there is why we drink, and I think, and there'd be a lot of people listening to this going, oh, yeah, I hear what Caroline is saying, but for me, I do get these benefits from it, and I do enjoy this, and I do enjoy that. Um, what were some of the beliefs well, two things. What were some of the beliefs you had about alcohol? Like it gave you confidence, it made you relax, it maybe made you more social. What were the beliefs you had that you found that just weren't true? And when you're coaching clients, what are the most common beliefs that they have that just turn out to be myths, and the opposite is true?
Yeah. Yeah. I find a lot have to do either with like beliefs about what alcohol is doing to you, both physically, and then also beliefs about what alcohol is doing that almost negate your natural ability to be like that. So, in the first category,
Yes.
a lot of people, for example, believe alcohol relaxes them, it's the stress reliever. And when we actually look down to what the biological effect of alcohol is doing, yes, it's a depressant, so it's slowing the central nervous system down, but at the same time, our body counteracts that and we release norepinephrine, we release cortisol, stress hormones in response to alcohol. And so sometimes if someone's really acute to this, you could have one drink and then 30, 40 minutes later, you'll feel those stress hormones. You feel a little bit wired on edge. And most people reach for another drink at this point. That's why one drink often begets another. But if you keep drinking all night, you'll wake up in the middle of the night, oftentimes 3 a.m., 4 a.m. wake up calls. And you just wake up being like, why? Like everything is wrong at 3 a.m. You can't fall back asleep. Your heart's pounding. You feel that shame. Or if you do sleep through the night, a lot of people feel more anxiety the next day. And so I don't see alcohol anymore as a 20-minute experience. I see it as a 48-hour experience. And we have to be really honest with ourselves, the entire effect of it. And so biologically, alcohol actually produces way more stress in your body than any of that relaxation effect. And most of that relaxation effect is often due to what our brain perceives as the ritual of alcohol. So there's this really cool study I'll tell you about that illustrates this point. So they found, a group of people that just got off work, and they put actual brain nodes onto their brains to be able to measure their brain activity. And everyone was very stressed out, right? So it's very chaotic brain waves. And they all sat down at a restaurant bar, and they all ordered a drink. And now the brain waves completely relaxed, just nice and smooth. But here's the kicker: nobody drank the drink yet. They just put in an order. That's it. So it goes to show that it's like the anticipation of this reward is what's really relaxing us and telling our body it's okay to slow down, work is done, it's time to decompress, than the actual biological effect of alcohol, which actually stresses us out after that 20-minute buzz wears off. So that's just like one fascinating thing. When you really learn the science behind that, the illusion gets popped. You're like, whoa, this wasn't what I thought it was. So
Hmm.
another example from another category is believing that alcohol makes you more of a superhero in some way, shape, or form, right? I grew up very introverted. I grew up very shy. I'm still much an introvert. And so as I, went to college, I became this extroverted version of myself when I drank. I thought it made me more popular, just so much easier to talk to people. And so I relied on it socially like a crutch ever since then. Now, there were nights that alcohol embarrassed me. There are nights where alcohol gave me nice little wine stains on my teeth. Like it wasn't actually feeding into my confidence. It was actually detracting it from it over time, making more insecure. We always say something out of character, perhaps, if we've been under the influence. But then what I really noticed was that every single time I had to reach for a drink socially, I'm literally telling my subconscious mind, you are not good enough on your own. You don't know how to talk to people. Nobody likes you, but here, have this drink and then you'll be better. And so, how is that actually ever raising my confidence? That is actually, in essence, lowering my self worth over time. So, this one took a little bit more psychological digging and like a way to kind of counteract and change it. But I ultimately concluded alcohol is only making me more insecure over time. And the only way I'll ever become more confident socializing without a drink is to practice it like a muscle that had never been worked out before and to find the strength within. Because confidence, these kind of intrinsic things, confidence, courage, intuition, creativity, they will never be found outside of us in some kind of, beverage or solution like that. It is always something that's found within. And that literally skyrocketed my confidence once I went through that process.
I think for a lot of people, confidence is a huge part of it. And maybe that's why a lot of people start. You talked about drinking in your teens. I think that's why a lot of people start drinking in their teens because we're evolving, we're coming out into the world. You're starting dating, all of these sort of things, and so you enter into this world, but you're still in those years of a lack of self confidence because you're changing so much and you're trying to attract the opposite sex, all of these things, and you walk into a bar or something, and of course you feel like I'm the idiot here, all this sort of stuff, and you reach for a drink because it's a crutch. And I hear what you're saying. The problem is that you'll never stop for a moment and actually address the underlying issue, which if you address it, you'll find it's false or you develop. You're never giving yourself the actual opportunity to develop that confidence. You're always smothering it. So it's really standing in your way, is what you're saying.
Yeah. And what's so interesting about what you're saying is so true. We are these young, bumbling, insecure people trying to
Yeah.
navigate the world. And that's when we learn to drink well before our brains are fully formed, right? But now we're not those people anymore. So now we're these adults that have created these lives and, have done so much. And we're still using a coping tool that we picked up as this young, immature version of ourselves without reevaluating, is this still really serving the person I'm becoming? Is it serving the person I'm trying to become? And especially as an entrepreneur, our world is filled with so much personal development and growth and, being able to have the capacity to reach these bigger goals in business. And oftentimes we're still using this coping mechanism we picked up when we're 16, 17 of this immature, less evolved version of ourselves. So it's almost like sometimes I've never been like a prohibitionist or like, let's make alcohol illegal or anything like that. But it's like, is it an outdated version of ourselves? And is it sometimes time to let it go to be able to grow into the version that we're really meant to be in this phase of our lives? And I think that's what the alcohol free movement today is so interesting. So I'll just share real quick. The alcohol free movement is what I consider this new reevaluation, a sober curiosity that's going around that's separate from a recovery or AA style
Yeah.
type of thing, right? So it's just like, it's giving more permission to people to be able to question alcohol without any labels or anything around it, with more flexibility. You don't have to go to alcohol free forever. You could just try it for a few months or something like that. But I think with that alcohol free movement, it is kind of just that really deep questioning that you're talking about of like, well, what serves me in this phase of my life? Even though I had a lot of fun partying in college and such and such and such, but is it really, especially as we get older? I mean,
Well, I think that's a really important distinction, and a it, I kind of wasn't aware of that until I dug a little bit deeper into your work, and you make it very very clear. This is not you're not aiming yourself towards alcoholics. You're not aiming yourself towards people who should be in AA or in recovery. That's not your audience. Your audience is people who are what you might say social drinking, who don't perceive themselves as a don't perceive themselves as having a drinking problem in their lives are probably working very well. And the alcohol free movement, what I think it does is it gives people permission. It shows them an alternative. It says, I suppose it gives them a banner to go, well, there is another option, and that option may be choosing to be alcohol free.
yeah, and I needed that permission so badly because when I was probably 7 years sober curious where I knew that it wasn't making me happy. I didn't like how I felt on those Monday mornings, but I just didn't see the alternative, because that's all I had seen and grown up around was this like, oh, you hit rock bottom and you're drinking vodka in the morning and all this kind of very stigmatic things. And if you don't want to claim or call yourself that, then you drink because that's just, there's no excuse not to drink.
Yeah.
Even in Europe, when you're pregnant, you still have to drink, right? Because there's just like literally, there's not a social excuse to say no, thank you. It is such a expected ritual in our society, right? And so I think this alcohol free movement is like, I don't have to claim that I have a problem just in order to like take a break or stop or try it or whatnot. And how complicated a relationship with alcohol is a very gray area. So yeah, we have people on the like, extreme end. I would call in that black category, who it's like, yeah, you would say that's a textbook alcoholic. They're drinking in the morning, they're physically addicted, all this kind of stuff. But then there's this huge gray area where, how much people drink at the very black level is a lot. But in this gray area, it is still above the health guidelines, right? And for women, that is actually very low. It is in a way that it's just not making you feel proud of yourself, or you do feel like, I feel gross the next day, or things like that. And the percentage of people who drink above the health guidelines is around 50 to 60%. So it's just goes to show that most people who call themselves regular drinkers are probably in that gray area. And it's only the people who very occasionally drink are more in that, okay, you're under the health guidelines. It's kind of that moderate drinking. Because even moderate drinking, they say like, oh, you can have a glass or two a day. According to your brain, according to a lot of the immune systems and functions in your brain, like most functional doctors are saying, no, that is not correct. You know what I mean? That's based on really flawed studies from the past. The less you drink, the better and the healthier you're going to be.
During the week, watching TV, and my wife, and I was talking to her about this conversation coming up, and so I looked up what the alcohol recommendation for women was. Now, I can't remember exactly, so maybe you can correct me. It was something like 17 units of alcohol. I can't remember, maybe you can tell me what it was. But whatever it was, I was absolutely shocked at how high the recommended safe level of alcohol was. So I don't know if it's different in the US to Europe, but can you tell me what the guidelines are for safe, what's considered to be safe levels of alcohol?
Well, it's so interesting since 2018, like the highest levels of studies and most, boards across say there's no safe level anymore, and that any reduction in alcohol is good. Canada just changed their guidelines to say that no more than 2 drinks a week would be considered less like safe, and zero would be considered the safest. 2 drinks is still, in the US it's still 7 a week, and then so we have a different than the units that you do. It's kind of double, I believe, with
Okay.
the units versus the thing. But even 7 drinks a week is like, now they're changing that. And with our new Surgeon General and kind of administration, they're trying to change it to lower as well too. So it's really fascinating to see that a lot of the science that came out, this is kind of crazy, but back in 1991, one doctor claimed that drinking red wine was good for you every single day. And then a plethora of studies came out trying to prove that point, and most of them were funded by the alcohol industry. And so all of this kind of myth of, moderation is so good for you, it's good for your heart, all this like red wine and stuff like that came out, and it became really imbued into our conscious and to our subconsciouses as well as a society. And so what started happening in the 2010 era is that these studies were starting to be scrutinized, and they found so many flaws. Like they were comparing sick people to healthy people, just like the amount of alcohol wasn't measured, it was just so many flaws that they started to remove all those flaws statistically. And they found there is actually now safe benefit to alcohol after that. Because, what it does, even for heart health, for example, actually drinking raises your blood pressure. Drinking can create more inflammation. My cholesterol went much lower after I stopped drinking than before. Drinking also makes your heart pump harder and faster without the exerted exercise. So it can lead to things like heart failure and just a bigger heart over time. And, the way that it can constrict your, arteries and stuff like that. It's just fascinating when you really look into the science. And it's just like a knowledge of a lot of other things where, we're kind of led to believe something is healthy and it's not really healthy for you. And
Mm.
so it's not to say that, you're going to die because you drank 1 glass of alcohol a night, you're probably fine. But I think it's really being able to recognize that some of these myths about how good alcohol is for you were always based on bad science. And so it's kind of just like any other of those things that aren't probably the best for us, like sugar or, fast food and stuff like that. How much of it do you want in your life? And a lot of people find with alcohol compared to other food groups or anything like that, because it does change your consciousness. You do usually want another drink after you have the first one. It's a lot easier to just be a little bit more like strict in just saying no thank you at all. Like the most people find that much easier. They're not playing the mental gymnastics when, when you tell yourself, oh, I'm going to have one drink tonight, and you go out with your buddies and they're drinking one, but you haven't even had dinner yet. You start like negotiating with yourself, like, when do
Mm.
I have the one drink that I'm allowed? It's just the mental gymnastics and the battle that goes over it. A lot of people find it just easier to be abstinent with it. But there's the sober curious movement, which allows all the possibilities of, I drink maybe occasionally, or I take 6 months off at a time, or I take a year off at a time. So like any permutation basically of how you want to make it work for you is totally, acceptable and very much valued, I think, in this like new curious dialogue, which I think is really, really fun. But what's interesting to me is what happens when you don't evaluate it. We've been conditioned since we're little kids to drink. We saw our parents drinking, we saw it all around us. It was ingrained in our brains that that was what marks an adult. And, for us, that's how I prove my adulthood. It's belonging for us, it's acceptance for us. It could be independence, rebellion, sophistication, glamour, status, all these things. And most adults, unless you go through a pregnancy, most adults, when they start drinking, never take a break from alcohol, which is really fascinating to me because then you don't know how you actually feel health wise. You don't know how your moods naturally feel. You don't know your mental health. Alcohol affects like our dopamine levels, our serotonin, our GABA. And so it's just like a fascinating thing to be like, what if most adults don't even know what it feels like to be an adult without it as a constant presence in their lives? And that's the thing to, to try, because I then don't have to recommend it myself anymore. You'll be so pleased with the benefits that you're going to love it so much too. You know what I mean? So that's what I think is very interesting.